Kia ora koutou. My name's Lockie Patterson and I'm a member of the board of the Preserving Local History and Educational Trust, and this is a repeat of a talk that I gave at the Dunedin Otipoti Heritage Festival. And the topic of the talk is the pictorial supplements of the Otago Witness. I started off my talk asking the audience who'd used papers past to look at old newspapers, and nearly everybody had. Some used it for genealogical research. Nearly everyone had used it for some kind of research. When I asked how many people had used the Recollect site of the Preserving Local History and Educational Trust to look at newspapers, pretty much no one there had. In fact, no one knew about it at all. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to start off with a little background on the Otago Witness, and then talk a bit about the pictorial supplements themselves and who might want to look at them now. Then I'll talk about the Preserving Local History and Educational Trust, which from now on I'm just going to call the Trust, what our mission is, and why did we decide to re-digitize the Otago Witnesses pictorial supplements. To give you a sense of what they're like, I'll show you some images, including some from the New Zealand and South Sea exhibition that was held in Dunedin 100 years ago, which is a major motif of this festival. And I'll finish off with how you can best access these images through the Trust's Recollect site. Now, the Otago Witness began in Dunedin in 1851, just a few years after Dunedin and Otago were founded as a colony. And it initially came out every 2 weeks, but within a very short time it became a weekly newspaper. It was sold in Dunedin, but the format really suited the rural market where subscribers couldn't necessarily get their mail delivered on a daily basis. And the Otago Daily Times, which you can tell from the title was a daily paper, appeared 10 years later, catering for a more urban subscriber base. Now, these newspapers emerged in the early days of photography, but the technological challenges of transferring photographic images onto newsprint cheaply had not yet been met. And it wasn't until the turn of the century that the Otago Witness started to print photographs. This, of course, gave the paper a renewed popularity, especially given that the Otago Daily Times wasn't printing photographs regularly until about 1927. And while there may have been a few images on its regular pages, most of the Witness's photographs were bundled together in its pictorial supplements. So, what are the Otago Witness pictorial supplements and what can they be used for? So these began in about 1900 and they continued until the paper closed down in 1932. So on this slide there are just a few images, and they were all taken from one issue, one random issue. And what I think you can see is there is a really wide range of subject matter on display. We can see a tramcar accident in Wellington. We can see people that have been to the races and what they were wearing. There's an Australian woman aviator, the wedding of the granddaughter of Charles Dickens, and also a photo of the Otago representative cricket team. There are lots of photos of Dunedin, of course, as well as Otago and Southland featuring a lot. But there were also a lot of photos from further afield, so from the rest of New Zealand and occasionally from elsewhere, from Britain and its empire, the USA, and the rest of the world. And these images reflected what was going on in the city, the province, the country, and the world at this time. But in 1900, when the supplements started, there was a strong focus on the Boer War, with photos and sketches from South Africa, from army camps in New Zealand, and scenes of departure of our troops to Africa. Now, of course, all of these pictures are a great treasure trove for social and cultural historians that give not only new insights to history, but also some pictorial texture to the printed record. And genealogists can sometimes find information and pictures of their ancestors, but these images are of particular importance to school children who can find a wealth of material for their research projects. And lots of them would probably find reading old newspapers to be a little bit dry, but looking at images can be much more interesting and can help stimulate a real interest in the past. But as with anything that's put online, there are no doubt lots of other reasons for people to use these photographs, including those interested in Dunedin's built heritage. For example, Alison Breeze from the Heritage New Zealand local branch recently told me that the Otago Witness images that we've re-digitised are really valuable in the work that they do. Okay, so what is the Preserving Local History and Educational Trust, and what is our mission? So the Trust was formed in 2022 as a registered charity. I joined early last year, and I'm the only Dunedin-based trustee, and we've got trustees from around the country. The goal's to digitise and make available all historical newspapers, that is from 1840, that are at the risk of loss or decay. Although the National Library has put a lot of newspapers onto its Papers Past site, this is actually just a fraction of all the newspapers that are out there. And at the moment, their practice is to digitise from existing microfilm. That is, to put up newspapers on Papers Past that have already been preserved. But they can be digitised quickly and cheaply. However, there are many papers that haven't been put on microfilm, and some are very much at the risk of deterioration and loss. And this in particular is the case for some of the smaller regional and suburban papers, as these have been shut down over time or taken over by corporate interests. Indeed, there have been cases where some titles have been just taken to the dump and lost forever. So the Trust's project, Your Stories, is about digitising newspapers that haven't already been microfilmed. We then make them available on our own Recollect site so that anyone can access them. And when the National Library, one of our key strategic partners, is ready to accept them, we then gift them so that they can be put up on Papers Past. This, of course, is all very expensive, and a big part of the Trust's work is trying to raise funds. We've been lucky in getting some money from the Lottery Grants Board, which has enabled us to get underway. And having been successful several times, there's no guarantee that we'll get more lottery money in the future. So we're happy to get funding from almost any source, whether that's from smaller community grants or from donations from individuals onto our Give a Little page, or if one day we can find a very wealthy benefactor. As you can see from this table, the Trust has already digitised a number of titles, but the table also shows a number of issues that the Trust faces. For example, the digitised Central News can only be viewed and searched within the museum at Alexandra. If a paper is under copyright, we can't just put it online. This needs to be negotiated with the copyright holder. So sorting these things out is a big part of our job. Now you can also see some gaps. This is because there isn't a full run. Some issues may have been conserved, others may have been lost. For example, if we look at the North Shore Gazette in the 1940s, we only have 5 issues for 1945, 9 issues for 1946, 2 for 1947, and just 1 issue for 1948. That's all that we know that still exist. But what you can also see is that we've been able to transfer some of our holdings over to papers past, and this is our ultimate aim. We have some others earmarked for transfer, but the process isn't as easy as here you are. The National Library also needs to make sure things are all set up at its own end and can only take so much material from us each year. And in the meantime, we're busy digitising new titles. Now you might say, there's not much Dunedin or Otago stuff here. Remember, this talk was for a Dunedin audience. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Just to give you an example, here are some newspapers that we could digitise, papers you probably haven't heard of. But we can only do this if we can get the funding. We also need help in finding some of those newspapers that we know existed and may still be out there, but at the moment there are no issues, or maybe just a few that are known to have survived. And what we're looking for is big runs, not just single issues of papers. And on our website, we have desiderata, i.e. lists of newspapers that we need help with. We were asking people if they have any knowledge to help us locate missing issues. For example, we have about 30 titles in the Dunedin Coastal Otago desiderata. Now people might be asking, why, if the Trust's policy is only to digitise at-risk papers that haven't already been microfilmed or digitised, why did we decide to do the Otago Witness's pictorial supplements? You see, the Otago Witness is on microfilm, and it's also on papers past, including the pictorial supplements. So under normal circumstances, the Trust wouldn't have bothered with this newspaper. There are plenty of other newspapers that haven't been preserved in any way and may be housed in less than perfect conditions or be in danger of deterioration or loss. So why do we make an exception and re-digitize the pictorial supplements? Unfortunately, the microfilm of the Otago Witness that the National Library used for its digitisation for papers past was not of great quality. It's fine for the text, but the images are pretty awful. Let's just have a look at some of them. Now, imagine you're a historian doing some research on mining and you want to look at some images, but this picture won't tell you very much. This picture was taken in Dunedin's Octagon in 1902 with a local clergyman addressing a crowd at a public event. Or could it be Lenin giving a speech in Moscow's Red Square? Gosh, the title says that this is a railway accident, but you can hardly tell from the photos. Or you might be from the Kenny family doing genealogical research. You find this photo, but can you see any family resemblance? Now this is a real pity because the original images are wonderful. They're mostly published on higher quality paper, not the usual newsprint that most newspapers use. But unfortunately, people might look at these images and think, wow, they're not really worth looking at. And what can happen is that people actually wanting a good copy of the actual image would go into our heritage institutions that hold physical copies, such as the Hocken Library or Toitū, but getting a high quality image this way is not free. I've also been told of school kids who would come into the Hocken for images. This is the sort of thing that happens quite frequently. It's all very well if you live in Dunedin, but much harder if you live outside the city. Now let's look at the Trust's re-digitisation, which is housed on our Recollect website. With the re-digitised image of the dredge, you can see a lot more detail of what's actually happening. The Reverend still looks a little bit like Lenin, but you can see the building and crowds better, and even the two little boys holding on at the bottom right. And with the train you can now see that there are a couple of people in the central image. You can definitely see a great improvement in quality. And if you were a descendant of Nene Kenny, there's now enough detail to look out for family resemblances. And this was actually quite a tiny photo on a page, and it still looks pretty good blown up to this size. The Trust felt that the Otago Witness images were such a taonga that we could make an exception and provide a much higher quality digital resource for our school students, historians, genealogists, and others with an interest in the past. People can now access these images from anywhere in the world, and it helps protect the physical copies held in our heritage institutions. We had already digitised the pictorial supplements from 1900 to 1924, and our plan is to complete the remaining years to 1932 at a later period. However, when this Heritage Festival came about, with its strong focus on the New Zealand and South Seas International Exhibition that was held at Logan Park in 1925 and 26, the Trust felt that we could do these 2 additional years to coincide with this festival as a koha to the people of Dunedin, and these are now readily available. And hopefully it won't be too long before the rest of the run is fully digitised. The exhibition was a huge event in Dunedin and New Zealand at the time, and this was documented by the Otago Witness's staff photographer and others. We can get a sense of the scale of the exhibition from this image, taken just before it opened. Much of the layout looks like very practical buildings. But the most distinctive feature was the Great Dome, which fronted the festival hall. This building featured extensively, effectively becoming the architectural face of the exhibition, also featuring on the Otago Witnesses Christmas Annual for 1925. Here we see it lit up at night, which I think must have been fairly impressive for Dunedin people at the time. And it even features in this artistic study in picturesque photography, showcasing a group of women dancers. The exhibition was extremely popular. These images are from the opening day, but there appears to have been great crowds throughout the 5.5 months that it ran, with 3 million visitors in total. And this was at a time when New Zealand's population was just over 1.25 million. The exhibition was designed to showcase New Zealand's progress in culture, as well as rooms highlighting other parts of the empire. So image 1, for example, is part of the Great Canadian Court, one of the international areas. Image 2 features Māori people, and 3 is handiwork from New Zealand's sub-empire of Samoa and the Cook Islands. Image 4 is for the prison service, and 5 and 6 show the work of the Post and Telegraph Department. It wasn't all dull exhibits though, with plenty of opportunity for fun, such as this scenic railway, which seems like a basic form of a roller coaster, an amusement park known as Joyland. People, many from Dunedin, were also very much involved with the ongoing activities, such as the exhibition's choir and orchestra. This included school children who sometimes came in to give demonstrations, such as this group of young cooks showing their skills in the education court, and these high school girls performing Swedish drill, and a group of Māori children from Te Muka. Now, if you want to look at these images yourself, how best can you access them? Unfortunately, the National Library has told us that it's technically difficult to insert these improved Otago Witness images onto their Papers Past platform. This is a real pity because Papers Past has an excellent search engine. If you want to access the better quality pictures, then you'll need to use the Trust's Recollect site. Now this is great if you just want to go in and browse. There is just so many great images that you could be in there for hours looking at them. And if you're wanting something specific, you can still use the site's search function. But some people find it easier, when looking at the Otago Witness pictures, to perform an initial search on Papers Past, find out what they want, taking note of the date and the page. So let's say we're looking for a picture of the iconic Spates Brewery building on Rattray Street. We look up Papers Past, having specified that we want to look at the Otago Witness, and that we want an illustration, i.e. a photograph. Now if we look at their picture, it's recognizable, but not a very good image. But take note that it was in the Witness of the 15th of October 1913 on page 40. So now I go to the Trust's Recollect site and I look up the word spate. Then I search for the issue with the right date. I bring that up and look for the right page by clicking on the thumbnails at the bottom. We have the right page, so I copy that page, then crop out the image that I want. So using the Trust Recollect site, you will be rewarded with far better pictures. Okay, let's wrap up. I hope you've learned something new about the Otago Witness and its pictorial supplements, and how to access high quality images. But also something about the Preserving Local History and Educational Trust, Te Pupuri I Ngā Hitori o Te Rohe Trust, and our work digitizing historical newspapers and making them publicly available. If you want to learn more about the Trust, who we are, and how you can help us, please go and look at our website. Nō reira e hoa mā, tēnā koutou.